The Canadian Children's Book Centre presents a Biblio Video webinar. Accessible books for everyone.
Welcome, everyone, to the Canadian Children's Book Centre's Biblio Videos presentation of how to make accessible children's books. So thinking about accessibility for children's publishers. I am going to paste a link in the chat to the Biblio Video accessible books playlist. Please feel free to poke around in there. We have lots of great content there, including a brand new video published within the last week about Monster House's journey to publishing accessibly. They're an independent publisher in New Brunswick who've done really great work. So that's worth checking out, including and lots of other things there as well. One quick note before we get underway, a bit of housekeeping. Closed captioning is available. We have a professional captioner working today. And if you want captioning, there are controls in the bottom of your Zoom screen to enable that. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available later on the Biblio Video YouTube channel, so you can go and look for it there. So just be aware of that as you carry on. All right, I am very excited today to introduce Kris Tomes. So Kris is someone I've known for a very long time, like maybe a decade even. She's nodding her head.
I think so, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I know that's weird because neither of us are that old. So I don't know. Anyway, Kris is from Minnesota, and she is the owner of Tomes Publishing Services. So she's freelanced and consulted for publishers throughout North America and New Zealand since 2012. And she's been involved in digital book publishing and the sort of community of ebook developers since then as well. So I think that's where we know each other from, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kris spent nearly 10 years at the Lerner Publishing Group, where she formed and led the company's accessibility team and managed ebooks, audiobooks, databases, apps, and an e-reading platform. Just a few things, just a few minor technical things. She's an international speaker, including speaking at eBookcraft and Tech Forum in Toronto, at the Minnesota Book Publishers Roundtable, etc. over the years. So she's a proponent of elastic assets, clean code, and future-proofing. That's some sexy talk, Kris. I like that. And Kris is especially passionate about making books accessible to all readers. So welcome, Kris. I'm so happy you could be here. It's really nice to have an expert of your caliber talking to our audience today. So I think you're going to share your screen, and I'm going to mute myself and let you take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Laura. All right, and could you just confirm that you can see my screen?
I already muted myself. I answered you, and then yes, I can see your screen. Thank you.
Great. All right, just minimize this. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Best Practices for eBook Production and Children's Publishing. Today, we are going to cover when to choose fixed layout or reflowable format for your children's ebook, how to set up your source InDesign file for accessible EPUB export, and the basics of accessible EPUB production. We'll also briefly touch on shifting market expectations in the overall publishing landscape before concluding with a Q&A session. So I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that I live on the traditional homelands of the Wapakut Band of the Dakota Nation, part of the Oceti-Sakowin, or the Seven Council Fires, also known as the Sioux Nation. A little bit about me, which Laura already covered pretty much, but for those who can't see me, I'm a woman in my 30s with chin-length brown hair with silver streaks and a light skin tone, although I did get a little sun over the weekend, so I'm a little red. I'm wearing a green shirt and I'm sitting in a room with a white background, and you might spot a dog in the background there as well. I have a master's in publishing from Emerson College in Boston. I spent nearly a decade at Lerner Publishing Group, where I managed the digital team and produced roughly 500 children's ebooks annually, and formed the company's accessibility team. All of this you've heard already. I love dogs, puns, kayaking, and nitty-gritty EPUB details. So let's dive in. So let's start with choosing between fixed layout and reflowable EPUB. Many publishers only have experience with one of those ebook format types, so I'm going to start with some quick definitions so we're all on the same page. Fixed layout ebooks, often called FXL, use absolute positioning to retain the print layout design simply in the digital space. It has the same page layout, page numbers, fonts, and text size as the print book. You cannot adjust the fonts, the colors, or sizing other than zooming in, like double tapping or pinching. Here's an example on the right side of the screen of a fixed layout picture book. Reflowable layout ebooks are more of an interpretation of a print design and uses relative positioning. The user has a lot more control to adjust the font, text size, colors, margins, etc. And as they adjust these settings, the content then reflows. Because of this, the page numbers do not align with the print book, although you can add a page list to allow navigation that matches the print book, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Here's an example on the right side of the screen where a chapter opens with a full width image, so that will always stay full width, and then the text next to it will reflow based on the user's settings. Generally speaking, reflowable ebooks are considered more accessible because they allow more user control and support more features used by assistive technologies. However, there are ways to make your fixed layout EPUB more accessible. In fact, the W3C has a working group dedicated to improving accessibility in fixed layout EPUBs, and they just published an early draft like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I'll have a link to that at the end of the slides as well. So choosing fixed layout over reflowable layout can be kind of a contentious topic in many areas of publishing, where fixed layout formats can sometimes be produced when a reflowable format is a better fit. Sometimes it can be seen as a way to cut corners, and it can be avoided by people who just are more comfortable producing reflowable ebooks in their day-to-day. But in children's books, there is a real use case for fixed layout ebooks. There are several considerations to weigh before deciding which format to pursue for your children's ebook. These include text load, text and image relationship, target age, and target market, and we'll go through each of these now. So text load. This means how much text is present on a typical page. There are text-heavy books, like novels, or text-light books, like a picture book, and then there's everything in between. So let's look at a couple of examples. On the left is a text-heavy book. It's a novel, so very few or no images. On the right is a photo-driven book with only 2 sentences per spread. I would recommend creating the text-heavy book as a reflowable and the text-light book as a fixed layout. Another consideration is the text and image relationship. Are the text and images tightly paired and retaining their physical placement necessary to understanding the context, or would there not be a context lost if the images and the text were decoupled? Here on the left is a picture book where dialogue is placed in speech bubbles that point to the character speaking. If the image and text were unpaired and experienced in a linear format, like it would be in a reflowable EPUB, that context would be lost and you wouldn't know who is speaking. Similarly, on the right, the graphic is a graphic novel in which each panel pairs a specific image with text, and some of the images even cross between panels. I would recommend creating both of these as fixed layout because the story really relies on that close text-to-image relationship. Target age is another consideration. The content aimed at a toddler versus a 5th grader versus a 12th grader is going to be very different. What I've noticed in my time in children's publishing is that 6th grade content tends to be where the content, typically starts to transition more to reflowable format. This is not a hard and cut rule, but it's just kind of my rule of thumb. And I'll show you a couple of examples. So here we have 2 books. On the left, a target age of K, kindergarten, and on the right, 5th grade. I would recommend creating both of these as fixed layout Even though the 5th grade book is really close to where I would switch over because of the text load is getting heavier, there are a lot more components like sidebars and captions, but I do still think this overall design is beneficial to the target age as is. Both of these books have a lot more text and, sorry, next slide. Here we go. Next, we have 2 books. On the left is 6th grade and on the right is 10th grade target age. Both of these books have a lot more text and few images. 10th grade book, in fact, only has an image as part of the design element for the chapter opener. And I would recommend creating both of these as reflowable ebooks. I'm gonna pause for some water quick. And lastly, you want to consider target market. Are you primarily selling into the trade market, school library, textbook? Each of these markets are going to have different expectations and compliance items they are watching for. For example, currently the trade market in North America is not terribly concerned with accessibility, whereas in K-12 textbook market and education market, there's an expectation that all students are able to use the book, including those with disabilities. Another consideration is the country or region that you're targeting. And here's where we get into that big buzz phrase, European Accessibility Act, which I hope you're not hearing about for the first time right now. If you want to sell your children's books into the European market after June of next year, you'll need to implement accessibility features into your ebooks. So now that we've decided which layout of ebook you want to create, it's time to set up your InDesign file to export the best possible EPUB. And I'd like to start off with styles. So people who are working on longer books are pretty used to using styles. I think it's a little less common in something young like a picture book because there's so little text, it's so easy to quickly design something. But using paragraph and character styles is really important because then that flows through down to the EPUB and you can control it by those styles. I also really recommend avoiding overrides and using those styles and deleting any overrides before you export. A couple other quick best practices are turning off ligatures, which get interpreted incorrectly by assistive technologies and screen readers. Avoid glyphs, all sorts of funky things can happen with them. For example, if you have a font with a closed A and there's an alternative character open A for like the younger reading levels, that isn't going to come through when you export your EPUB. It'll default back to the original. Avoid typing in all caps. Use the caps option in your style instead. And then make sure you're using OTF or TrueType fonts, no Type 1 or PostScript. Those don't work in a digital space and they won't transfer over. Next up is semantic and hierarchical HTML. So really you want to make sure as much of the text of your book is live, and that means typed out, not an image of your text. You also want to use real tables, not images of tables. And we want to properly assign export tags. So make sure all of your headers are hierarchical. So your chapter opener is H1, any B heads are H2, etc., all the way down through H6. Any non-header paragraph styles should be assigned to SP for paragraph. And use numbered list and bulleted lists, and then just assign them as automatic. So no fake lists, use the actual list functions when you're setting up those styles. I would also really like to focus in on how to do character styles for a couple of pieces here. This is an area that has tripped me up in the past, and it's taken me a while to figure it out. So you want to make sure that anything that is simply visually appearing as italic and no other semantic meaning is mapped to I for italic, whereas something that needs to be emphasized where the word has to be stressed as M for emphasis, and any sort of citation, so for like CMS or MLA or whatever style you're using, that should be marked as cite. Similarly, for something that only is visually appearing as bold and no other importance, semantic importance is given to that as B. And then for those pieces that are important or serious, like a warning or something like that, use strong. And then lastly, just for reflowables, you'll need to select where to split your document, and that would be on most of your H1s, which here's a quick little screenshot of what those export tags would look like. Next up is reading order. For fixed layout EPUBs, the order in which you add elements to the page is typically the order it appears in the fixed layout EPUB. So if you put down your background image first and then you put your text on top of it, great, it's probably going to come out correct. If you have to fix any incorrect reading order, you'll have to do that after export. For reflowable EPUBs, you'll need to anchor those images into place and then stitch the text and images into reading order. I highly recommend Rorohiko's free text stitch API tool. It is a lifesaver. It very quickly allows you to order your content before exporting to reflowable EPUB. Next up is navigation. So quick water break. I recommend using InDesign's table of contents creation feature to build your TOC, regardless of if it's fixed layout or reflowable. A couple settings to make sure you grab is create PDF bookmarks. This is actually applicable to fixed layout EPUBs, not just PDFs. And then make text anchor in source paragraph. That's if your table of contents is going to go onto the page and will be visually seen by someone. That just hyperlinks it so someone can click on it and get to that location. Then don't forget to save the style because you will have to select it during your EPUB export. Alternatively, you can, for a fixed layout, also just use the bookmarks panel and set up bookmarks for any pieces there. But I do recommend using the TOC tool. And then we've got navigation landmarks. So the body matter landmark is the only required landmark, but I do highly recommend using front matter and back matter landmarks as well. And also any sort of special back matter pieces, especially when you're getting into those higher grade levels, like an index or a glossary. Those are really helpful to point out so someone can quickly jump to them using their reading system or assistive technologies. Page list. Now, this is an exciting one for me. So the page list is a one-to-one match to the print book's page breaks and numbers. So when you're in like a classroom setting or a book club, you can quickly jump to the exact same location as someone who's using the print book and you're using the ebook. Beginning in InDesign 19.4, which I think was last month, maybe 2 months ago, InDesign now automatically creates page lists for both fixed layout and reflowable. Previously, it was just fixed layout. All you have to do is during export, and I'll show you a screenshot of this in a little bit, is to check the box for page navigation, and it will export the page list for you. You just have to make sure at this point to double check it. There are a couple little glitches that you have to watch out for, but it's fantastic, much better than making these by hand. Next up, we have hyperlinks. So basically hyperlink anything possible. You want to make sure people can navigate around your book. So hyperlink any URLs that go out to websites, hyperlink any footnotes or endnotes with backlinks. So if someone goes to it, they can return to where they were in the text. Again, this is probably more for older books like middle grade or YA. Hyperlink an index. Any sort of in-text references like see page 20, so-and-so, all of those, and then QR codes. I don't know how many of you are encountering QR codes in your books. When I worked at Lerner, we had quite a few in a program called Page Plus, and we just turn those QR codes into buttons, just hyperlink it, because if someone's reading on a device, they might not have another device to scan the QR code with. It's just a really clunky experience. So making that clickable is really helpful. Gutter jumps. So for any spread-based images, such as a picture book, ideally, these would be adjusted to single-page images, so the images aren't too large. And also, if you add your own gutter jump offset, which is maybe not as popular as it used to be because digital printers are much better about this now, but if you add your own gutter jump offset, you have to remove that offset before exporting your fixed layout EPUB, because otherwise you'll see the offset and it'll look really weird. Image descriptions. So this is also known as alternative text or alt text. Basically, it's an alternate text for any of your images. So you can add your alt text by going to Object Export Options, selecting the alt text tab, and then you can select Custom to add any copy you want into that field, Or if you have a design element that doesn't need alt text, you can select the text, the decorative image, no alt text option. I really, really highly recommend adding your alt text in the InDesign file and not adding it afterwards in the EPUB, because then it lives with the file. So if you ever go back to that InDesign file in the future for maybe a new EPUB spec, maybe we've gotten to EPUB 4.0, or maybe there's a brand new file format type, you've got all that information in your source file. For spread-based images, I recommend placing the alt text on the first image only, and then make a reference that there is a second image. And then for panel-based images, I recommend listing out each panel's alt text in order. So like panel 1, yada, 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 panel 2, yada, yada, yada. So someone can follow through that in order. Next, we have metadata. So there are a couple different kinds of metadata. Schema.org, which looks like I missed the .org here, is any of your general metadata that's in the InDesign file that will then go and live inside the EPUB itself. So this is like your title, author, illustrator, etc., etc. This is also your language metadata. So making sure InDesign, I think, will automatically detect what language you're using. And then you just need to set up character styles for any languages that differ from your main language, which is really simple. Just highlight the text, make a character style, go into advanced and select which language it is. During export, you have a couple other options, and we'll see a few screenshots of this, but there's general metadata, so like your ISBN, publisher, anything from your file info will flow down into there. If you missed that, you can put it in here. And then accessibility metadata. This is another really exciting change to InDesign this year, where there's now an accessibility tab in the EPUB export prompt, giving you lots and lots of options. So you don't have to manually put that in later words in the EPUB. And then there's ONIX metadata. You want to make sure that you've got your general metadata, which hopefully all of you are already familiar with, and then accessibility metadata. This, and I highly recommend using onyxcodelist.io, this link here, for looking at that accessibility metadata. This isn't necessarily displayed at most distributors and retailers yet, but I do think a change is kind of happening right now. And Laura and, oh, and I'm forgetting her name, recently did a presentation on metadata that I highly recommend. I think there's an article version of it over on Accessible Publishing Learning Network. Okay, so now that your InDesign file has been set up, it's time to export the EPUB and clean up the output. So let's start with exporting a fixed layout EPUB. I'm going to take another water break. Okay, so you have InDesign open, you'll go up to File, Export, and then we'll select the fixed layout option. When you do that, you'll get this little pop-up here on the right hand of my screen, and you'll start on the General tab. You want to make sure you've selected all pages. You want to select your cover image, because that should be a separate file from your InDesign file. You want to select the navigation TOC. That could be the bookmarks, or that could be the TOC that we set up earlier, depending on which one it'll flow down. It'll always be in bookmarks for fixed layout, so that's a way to make sure you're always getting the right one. And then spread control, I usually recommend doing based on document setup. However, if you have a picture book that has a lot of text that crosses the gutter, like goes across one page and continues on to the next page, I do think there is a case for using convert spread to landscape page. That way, someone using assistive technologies will not have their text stop in the middle and then start again on the next page. It'll just read it through as a full single experience like a sighted reader would. So that is one option there for you. Next tab is conversion settings. These might be the default ones. I always select format automatic, resolution 150 ppi, your format method progressive, image quality high, and palette adaptive no dither. On the right, we've got the metadata tab. This is the general sub tab there. Identifier, InDesign will automatically assign a UUID for you, but you can replace this with a earn ISBN and then your numbers. Fill out all of your metadata here. That's all great. Most of it should come through from your file info if you put it there first. Then here on the left hand of the screen, we have the exciting new accessibility sub-tab. That is my new favorite. So there are a lot of options in here. A lot of these won't be applicable to children's publishing, but click whichever ones are. Typically, I would say those would be alternative text, ARIA, page break markers, page navigation, print page numbers, reading order, structural navigation, and table of contents. Then we have the accessibility features. Those were the features. Accessibility hazards. These are any sort of hazards just to warn people. So are there flashing? Is there motion? Is there sound? In your typical children's ebook, you aren't going to have any of those, so you can just select none. If you've got an enhanced ebook, then some of these might be applicable. All right, so then we have access mode and access sufficient. And I will admit, it has taken me a while to figure out the difference between these two. Access mode is if the book contains any of these elements. So does it contain auditory? If it's just a standard ebook, no. Does it contain tactile? No. It contains text and it contains visual because you're looking at the book and there's text in the book. So text and visual are probably what you'll always select here. Then access mode sufficient is, can someone access this book using only this method? So auditory, no. Tactile, no. Textual, yes. If you've got text and you've got alt text, someone will be able to experience your book just fine, textual only. Visual, same thing. If you've got text and images, or if you've got anything to look at all, yes, visual. So those are usually what I select there. Then we've got the accessibility summary on the left. I typically list out just a couple things here. This is supposed to be a human readable summary. So just kind of listing out things that will make sense to someone, a customer who is purchasing this. So includes alt text, page list, EPUB type navigation, ARIA roles, and optimized for color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 is what I usually put. And then I'll say if it aligns with a certain standard. There is also on the right side of the screen, a conforms to option, which lets you select the standard as well. But I also like listing it in the summary. It's just nice to have it in both places. Okay. Moving on to reflowable EPUBs. It's a little different with a few more options, although the accessibility tab is the same as fixed layout, so we'll breeze through that piece of it a little quickly. So just like before, you go up to File, Export, and this time you select EPUB Reflowable. This general tab looks a little different. You want to make sure you're selecting the EPUB 3.0 version and choosing your cover version. A new addition here is that you can add alt text for your cover. So I usually say cover : I give the title, I say by author name, and then if there's some visuals there, I will describe them. In my example here, it's just a blank thing, so I didn't describe it. Then for our navigation TOC, we want to select that multi-level TOC style and then our exact TOC style that we set up. I always name mine TOC, so it says TOC, but you can name yours whatever you want. And then here is that handy dandy checkbox called page navigation, and this will export your page list for you. So very important to click that. And then lastly, we've got the split document. We just want to split these based on the paragraph style export tags that we set up earlier. Next is the text tab. I like selecting the footnote option for pop-ups. I think these are really handy dandy, and if you've got backlinks, they are accessible. So those are really helpful. Make sure your lists are being mapped to unordered lists and ordered lists. That's great. And then over here on the object tab on the right side, you just want to preserve your appearance from layout. You're going to mess with this later in the EPUB, so that's fine. Keep it fixed, align center, no spacing before or after. That's all good. And then conversion settings is the next tab. These might also, yeah, these are default, and actually these are the same as the fixed layouts: automatic, 150, progressive, high, and adaptive, no dither. Those are all good. Okay, and then we've got HTML and CSS. So I like using the option for include classes in HTML and generate CSS, preserving local overrides, and including embedded fonts. So I know I told you not to have any overrides existing when you're setting up your InDesign. They tend to sneak through. So preserving logo overrides here allows you that opportunity later to clean it up appropriately, either assigning those overrides a semantic name so it makes sense what they are, or removing them if they are unnecessary. And then including embeddable fonts. This is just a nice way of giving your reader a similar to print experience, although they can use their settings to use another font. Additional CSS is an option here. I would not use this for fixed layout, but for reflowable, if you've got a long-standing series that always uses the same styles, like exact names, always looks the same, is treated the same, you could have a template CSS that you could add here instead, and then that would take off a lot of your CSS cleanup on the back end in the EPUB. So I do recommend that for long-standing series. And then here we've got the accessibility tab. Exactly the same as fixed layout, so I won't go through it again, other than you might have a few more pieces here. You might have captions, you might have an index, a couple of things like that. So just go through and mark whichever ones are applicable to your specific book. Okay, so now you've exported your EPUB. We're going to clean it up. So let's start with fixed layout format. These are a little more straightforward. So once exported, you'll need to unzip the EPUB file in order to edit the contents. I like to use eCanCrusher, which is a free tool. There are a couple others out there. Then you'll need a text editor, such as Sigil, which is free. Or if you already have Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, you could use Dreamweaver. Again, there are a lot of tools out there. Use whatever you are most comfortable with. I always start off by making sure my meta property rendition orientation and meta property rendition spread are set to auto. There are a couple other options here. Both was popular for a while. I know auto is the one that works for the majority of retailers, including Kobo, who had issues with the both options. So that is my recommended setting there. I also recommend you quickly page through your book in, if you're on a Mac, in book software, if you're on something else, maybe Radium or some other software, just to make sure the spread alignment is correct. And by that, I mean that when you're up in spread mode, that the correct pages are facing each other. It's pretty common for an extra page to kind of slip in there and throw everything off, depending on how it's set up, especially if you're doing an ebook of a board book. That's pretty common too. So just double checking those. And if something's off, you can adjust that in the content OPF spine by either removing a page or adding a page. I also highly recommend confirming the language is present in all necessary places. So this is in the content OPF's package, right at the top of the document, in the content OPF's DC language, in every single XHTML's HTML at the top of the document, and then any language shifts throughout in your XHTML. Then I like to go through and add semantic titles to every XHTML's title tags at the top of the book. They'll usually come through automatically as the name of the XHTML file. So it'll be, if you named your InDesign file like the ISBN of the book, it would be ISBN-1, ISBN-2, ISBN-3, which is not semantic or helpful to anyone. So changing those to something that is human readable and helpful. Adding ARIA roles, there are a ton of them. I have a good link to Daisy's knowledge base here for an exhaustive list. Basically, you can put a role on anything. So I highly recommend adding those. And then ARIA labels as well. This is maybe less common for early children's books, but when you start to get into maybe like the 4th grade reading level, you could be introducing sidebars, and these are very important for sidebars, making sure things are labeled properly. So again, Daisy Knowledge Base has a great information base on that. And then adjust your reading order. This is literally just looking at your XHTML and dragging divs around until things are properly ordered top to bottom in the order you want someone to read that content. Okay, we also want to size down large images. I usually go for 1,000 pixels wide for a page-based image and 2,000 pixels wide for a spread. I don't like going much lower than that. In really rare cases, I'll go down to 800 pixels for a page and 1,600 for a spread. But as screens get better, they can display higher quality images. So it's that balance between trying to keep your EPUB file under 40 megabytes, which tends to be where most retailers want you to be, and making sure your images look nice. Then, once you're done with all of those steps, you want to rezip your EPUB using eCan Crusher or whatever else you're using, and then validate it both with EPUB Checker, and I highly recommend Flight Deck. Flight Deck catches a bunch of tiny little pieces that EPUB Checker doesn't look for. It's also specifically looking for retailer specs, so it'll frequently catch for example, if an image is over 4 million pixels for Apple, or if an XHTML file is more than 3 megabytes for Kobo, tiny things like that, which can save you a big headache down the line. And then lastly, I run it through Daisy. So Ace by Daisy, sorry. So Ace is software free. You can go download it. It works on Mac and Windows. And it gives you just a little report of the accessibility of your book. It shows you any sort of warnings, shows you all the alt text on your images. It's just a really quick, easy way to check a couple of things and iterate. And then lastly, test. You've made your ebook, yes, but you want to test it with assistive technologies as well, in addition to a variety of devices and viewing options to make sure it's working for all readers. Okay, so now we're going to dive into reflowable EPUB. The very first thing I do here after unzipping the reflowable EPUB is making sure it's split correctly. And that means quick paging through it or quick opening every XHTML file. I like paging through it in Books on a Mac. And just making sure that each chapter starts as its own file, each piece of front matter, each piece of back matter starts as its own file. This is just a really nice way to ensure that each file itself is going to be under that 3 megabyte size limit for Kobo. It also ensures that the book will load quickly. So making sure it's split correctly, great. If it is, just pop into your content OPF and add this meta property rendition flow auto. This is just saying, hey, I'm a reflowable ebook. And I think this is new as of EPUB 3.3. So then you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning up the CSS. InDesign likes to generate a lot of junk code, and there's quite a bit of cleanup to do here. What I like to do is set defaults on selectors P and H1 through H6 and list, and add this near the top of the CSS because it'll cascade, and then any of those styles that were output with those extra bits removed will first take the defaults and then it'll inherit any of those changes. So that's a really nice way to do it. I also like to set my default sizing for images to make sure this will work on both the EPUB, both iPads and e-readers as well as for Kindles. Kindle gets a little funky around images, so getting that right is important. I also highly recommend using ems and percentages, which are relative positioning, instead of pixels, which are absolute positioning. This just ensures that your book is as elastic as possible and can work on a variety of viewports and with a variety of assistive technologies. I also recommend adding fallback fonts. Most styles, sorry, my dog is itching. Most CSS will come through with the main style that you pick for your book and then one default of serif or sans serif. I recommend adding another one in there if you have a preference there. And you can even add something like cursive. If you're using a script, just saying the word cursive will give you whatever the cursive default is on that e-reading device. Then it's time to resolve any overrides. These will usually be at the end of the CSS file called idgen para override 1 or idgen chara override 1. So just going through those, semantically renaming them if possible, if necessary, or deleting them if necessary. Then you're going to spend a lot of time just adjusting your CSS, massaging it, and your HTML, and getting that desired overall design that is an interpretation of your print book. Okay, so then quite similar to fixed layout, we're going to add, oh no, not yet. So we're going to add semantic HTML, such as sections. So each of your XHTML files should be within a section. Setting up asides, figures, and big captions. A lot of these will come out as divs originally from InDesign. So just applying the appropriate semantic HTML so they are more useful to people using assistive technologies. Then, similar to fixed layout, we'll add title semantics, ARIA roles, ARIA labels and labeled by. And then here we're going to check the page list page break inserts. So in my experience, which it's only been a month or two since this feature's been in InDesign, but I'll get page breaks insert it in the middle of a word, which will physically give it a space in the word. So what I like to do is move those to the beginning of the word. And my theory here is that if someone is trying to get to a particular page, they would rather get a whole word and not miss a word from the previous page. So they'd rather start half a word forward versus half a word back. So just put it to the beginning of the word, and then that should work out just fine. And then also similar to fixed layout, just size down your large images to 1,000 pixels wide, rezip, validate with ePub checker, and I recommend Flight Deck, run it through Ace by Daisy, make any adjustments as necessary. I think I missed earlier saying that Ace by Daisy will flag any color contrast issues. So we want to go for that 4.5 to 1 color contrast ratio. So making those changes, and then again, test. Reflowables work on a lot more devices than fixed layout, so be as thorough as possible. I like using iPads, Kindles, old e-ink devices that maybe will break soon, but just using a big variety of devices there and making sure everything looks well to everyone. Okay. So now we're going to kind of conclude here. The biggest shift I am seeing right now is accessibility. Surprise, surprise, everyone, right? The European Accessibility Act's deadline is just a year away in June 2025. This has heightened the priority of accessibility for a lot of publishers, shifting from a nice to have to a compliance issue. The EAA is also having a domino effect in other countries and regions, such as the US and Canada, where publishers want to be able to sell the same ebook into every region. So I also think that, sorry, water break. In addition, the features that make an EPUB more accessible also make it more machine readable, which means that it can be used for more AI opportunities in the present or in the future. As AI continues to evolve, the ability of a publisher to use or reuse their own content will become even more valuable. So while you think about that, here are a few resources that I recommend in addition to the links throughout. Accessible Publishing Learning Network is fantastic. I go there all the time. Daisy's knowledge base, also referenced earlier, NELS is great. And then I have a couple of the W3C's specs here. I'm a nerd and I like reading specs all the time. I do highly recommend it. There are going to be things in there that are going to be edge cases that I didn't cover here, and it's really useful to have that firsthand knowledge. A couple credits, all ebook screenshots throughout were courtesy of Lerner Publishing Group, and all ebook personified ebook illustrations like the one down in the right corner were by Ines Halverson. And now it's time for questions.
You must be exhausted. That was just a tremendous amount of information in 45 minutes. Well done, Kris. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I cut that down.
It's impressive. Okay, so we do have a number of questions. The one thing I do want to preface, I want to just talk a little bit about the EPUB export, particularly for reflowable from InDesign. I have been heavily involved in the work to get them to fix those things, particularly around accessibility. And I wanted to say a few things. Yeah, you're welcome. It's a lot of work. The conforms to metadata from that metadata tab is not sticky at the moment. It's not coming out in the EPUB. I hope that will be fixed really soon. I don't know if you've noticed that, but yeah, you can choose what it conforms to, WCAG 2.1 level AA, but it won't come out. So just a quick note about that. The page navigation is, I hope very soon that there will be a source, a field in the EPUB export wizard where you can put a source ISBN. So that's in the works and will happen at some point this year, fingers crossed. And then the final thing I wanted to say is that there is an option to choose print page numbers for the metadata, and you should avoid that field if at all possible. It's been deprecated and it's going to disappear from that window.
Okay, so, that is good to know. Thank you, Laura.
You're quite welcome. It's ongoing work and it's a bit gnarly, but yes. Okay, so one of the first questions we got is from Make Digital Library, or Make Digital Library. What is the difference between having an EPUB fixed layout and a PDF, and what advantages does the EPUB bring?
Sure. So I would say a PDF was the primary fixed layout ebook format for a long time, and it has since, for most distributors and retailers, been replaced by the fixed layout EPUB. Just generally speaking, the fixed layout EPUB is much, much more accessible. It's live text, nothing is rasterized. There are a lot more accessibility features that we touched on, like the navigation, things that assistive technology are using, where the PDF just isn't, in my experience. So I really do highly encourage making those fixed layout EPUBs if you can. However, I should say, when I worked at Lerner, we made both. We still kept making PDFs because we had a few school library distributors who still only accepted that. So if you have the bandwidth, both. If you don't have the bandwidth, go for EPUB.
Good answer. Thank you. This next question is from Anne Doyon. She's asking about Indigenous languages. She publishes in Indigenous languages and wonders if there are any workarounds. Yeah. How much experience you have with that? Yeah.
So actually recently just worked on a couple series in Ojibwe. It is, you kind of have to hack it, I guess is the best way to put it. Just Googling, and I can find a resource somewhere and provide it afterwards. Just Googling what the HTML code is for that language. I mean, hopefully it exists. There's hundreds and hundreds, and I know not every language is going to be covered. I was lucky that Ojibwe was covered. Just Googling it, getting that code, and then you can put that into the content OPF in the language slot. So Ojibwe, for example, is OJ. So I just popped that in there. If you're making a KF8 for Amazon separately, which we didn't really talk about today, they only have very few languages they support in their metadata of an ebook. I think it's only like 15 or 20, and I could not hack it and put Ojibwe in there. It wouldn't let me do it. So that's why EPUB is better.
Yeah. One of the things I find also is you can label all of those languages as what they are: Cree, Ojibwe, Inuk, whatever. Assistive technology support is quite another thing and is out of our control as ebook developers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another question. Can you say more about how ligatures and glyphs can cause issues for screen readers?
Yes. So a ligature will show up in an ebook as like a whole separate character. It's like a merging of two letters, and assistive, well, any sort of screen reader or anything doesn't know what to do with that. So you're going to lose that word. It'll just kind of over it, is my experience. Similar with glyphs, you're just not going to get the correct interpretation of that. Again, I'm thinking about screen readers. I think about screen readers a lot. I think it's a really good way of just thinking about, like, as a basic assistive technology, like, is this going to sound right? And it's really easy to test in Thorium, just if you want to play around, which is free. Yeah, and then glyphs, sometimes they either don't show up correctly, they'll look wrong, or they'll show up as an image and then there's no context there. So I do recommend avoiding those.
I'm going to put a link to Thorium in the chat because it is such an excellent testing tool. So if you're not aware of Thorium, there's a link there now. It has a built-in screen reader, so you can just press play on any content and test it. It's a really valuable tool, particularly for fixed layout, to test the order of content, to make sure that it's being read in the right order, because that's something that, in my experience anyway, it puts through the cracks. That's almost always one of the last things I think about. Okay, we have a question now from Charles Lapierre. How would you recommend for a fixed layout children's book where the text on the image must be positioned exactly, for example, like speech bubbles? How can that be accessible for a screen reader so that they can both understand the content and the associated image on the page?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because if you have one image for the whole page or spread and multiple speech bubbles, you aren't going to be able to have that exact pairing of speech and image alt text. Really good question. My initial thought, which would be extremely clunky for setting up an InDesign, would be to put your image on the page, then copy, paste in place, paste in place, paste in place, and then change the object frame size down to the exact piece you want, and do that for each piece, and then add alt text to each piece, and then make sure they're ordered correctly. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, but I think that would do it.
Do you think I'm just thinking out loud, but
yeah,
like an ARIA labeled by, or some way to do it afterwards in the code so you can associate those two things? It's such a good question that I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
but I wonder if there aren't some post export code things that we can do to connect those two rigidly. Anyway. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have so many questions. It's really great. Okay, Make Digital Library again, asking, how do you recommend adjusting the images, especially with percentages, especially when they are very flat images or images that in a book were originally a double page?
Yeah, so you can't get bigger than a single page in an ebook, other than your synthetic spread if you're looking in portrait mode. So really the only way to get it as big as possible is if your e-reading system allows you to tap on the image and make it bigger. So that's something that I do kind of rely on a little bit for reflowables. But really you're stuck with the confines of the viewport of the device someone is using. So 100% is as big as you can go. Yeah.
Yes. It is tricky. Okay, another question. In which application can we correctly test the ARIA labeled by and ARIA described by?
That's a good question. Does Thorium do that?
These are such good questions.
It's been a little while.
I'm scratching my head. Yeah, I know.
I bet Jaws
I'm not sure
would.
either, Kris.
Yeah, I bet Jaws would. I'm not sure if Thorium does. I would have to check. Yeah, that's a really good question. Admittedly, I test a little less on ARIA roles, and I just make sure when I'm looking through the ebook that it's there, and then in Ace by Daisy that it's there.
Fair enough. One resource I can point this question after to is epubtest.org, where they actually have a fresh set of assets there for testing with. And they have results from testing with all of the reading systems. So there may be something in there that you could pick through and find how to answer that question. Charles Lapierre in the chat says you must use assistive technology, but using Thorium with NVDA or JAWS, you will get that ARIA labeled by. So thank you very much, Charles. There's your answer. Yeah.
Good deal.
Okay, Asta is asking, how you count the time you need for making an EPUB book, and how you count the price for making an EPUB book. Boy, these are gnarly questions.
Are you cut out just a smidge? How can you count what? Time?
Both time that you need to make an EPUB and how much it will cost to make the EPUB.
Cost. Okay, so, yeah.
Time and cost.
Yeah. I mean, as you do it more, you'll be faster at it. So for someone just starting out, it's going to take a lot more time, build up your skills, get comfortable with it. I highly recommend really good internal documentation for your team, so more than one person knows how to do it. And then you can kind of play off of each other and count that as a living document because it's a living spec, so change it as necessary. Personally, a simple picture book, maybe 20 minutes. Honestly, it doesn't take that long. Maybe 30 minutes if we're counting all of like flight deck and all of the pre-flighting pieces. That's not the QA. Usually I have someone else QA from me because it's easier for someone who didn't work on it to catch things. It's fresh to their eyes. In terms of cost, I would say it's like all or nothing. If you're going to go in on creating ebooks in-house, get that knowledge base in there, at least per format type, and make a dedicated person or team to work on that. It'd be really difficult just to do like a couple here and a couple there and justify the cost, but having a dedicated person for it, then you can offset any of the costs that you would have done going to an outside vendor. In my experience, packaging InDesign files, sending them to someone, sending them notes, waiting for it to get them back, reviewing them, making changes, sending them back takes so much longer than just making them in-house. It is a really, really big time difference. And generally, I say in-house creation has better quality as well because you have a stake in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will say this, Kris might not, but I will say it out loud. Kris is a freelancer and she can help you make your ebooks if you want. You can go straight to the expert, and there's her website right there on the screen if you like. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to try to slip in one last question if you have the patience for it, Kris. And this is again about PDFs and EPUBs. So Catalina is asking, why should one create an EPUB fixed layout for children's books if PDFs also have accessibility features? Also, I find EPUB fixed layout have weird behavior in different EPUB readers. Any way to mitigate that?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, I would say never open a fixed layout EPUB in Adobe Digital Editions. It does not support that format. That might be why you're having weird issues. Yeah, unfortunately, there's not like a really good table of this system supports this format. I wish there was. I always tell people, if I'm sending you this format, test it over here and this over here, so we don't run into issues like that. As for why not just do PDFs, again, PDFs don't have as many accessibility features as EPUBs. They're not as usable. They have some, but they're not as usable as an EPUB. And I would really encourage you to do EPUB instead of PDF. I feel like I'm a broken record now, Laura. Anything to add on your
I know.
end?
Well, I would also say that you can't sell PDF in most retail outlets.
Not anymore.
So that's a major deal breaker for PDF, frankly. And if EPUB is built on HTML, which is natively accessible, it's intended to be accessible, which is not the case with PDF. And so if, for example, you want to meet the needs of the European Accessibility Act, then you need to slap those PDFs out of your hands and stop thinking about them and wrap your head around HTML and EPUB because it's an open spec that's designed to be accessible. So, Okay, this was really tremendously useful, Kris. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. We've had a couple of comments in the chat already about how useful it was and how folks are going to have to go look at the video to catch up on all the details. But thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for attending. Watch your email for news of a follow-up survey. You will get that, I think, automatically. And have a nice afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Let's tell everyone about accessible books so that kids everywhere can discover the joy of reading.